everyone, and welcome to Evolve, brought to you by FLO. I'm your host, Gabrielle, and today we're joined by Cory Bullis, who's the Senior Public Affairs Manager at FLO, and Gemma Trigueros, who's Designer at UX at FLO. I'm so excited to get into what we're going to be talking about today, which is just about inclusivity, right? Inclusivity within our communities and making that more EV friendly through that inclusivity and, just leading the way towards a better charging experience overall. It would be great if we could go between the both of you and just talk about, your name, your title. So let's go ahead and start with you, Cory.
Sure. So I'm Cory Bullis. I'm a Senior Public Affairs Manager at FLO. And really, that's just our way of saying I handle a lot of policy issues when it comes to government affairs. So I work with the federal government, state governments, local governments, stakeholders, all to craft policies that are going to help grow the EV and EV charging markets.
Gemma, if you could please just give us your name, your title, and just what it is you do within your industry.
Yeah, so hi. My name is Gemma Trigueros. I'm a UX designer at FLO, and what we basically do, I'm part of a team here at FLO of designers. We have service designers, interaction designers, UX designers, and our main goal is to improve the experience of the EV drivers, basically, through to make it as frictionless and seamless as possible.
Wonderful. Seamless is always a great way to go. We don't want a lot of friction when we're speaking, of course. And, to start us off, Cory, we're hearing just more and more people say that EVs are the future of transportation. So could you just tell us a little bit about that and the state of the industry?
What I would say is there's all kinds of investments and policies getting actively designed at the federal and state and local levels to help grow these markets. So you'll see from states like California, Massachusetts, Washington, they're all planning to phase out the sale of gas cars. And that's just the tip of the spear. I think we'll see more states take action beyond that. And states are setting goals to deploy EVs and deploy EV charging. But they're also putting their money where their mouth is with these, regulations or goals. They're actually backing it up with public dollars, public incentives to help people purchase EVs or EV chargers. The federal government, for instance, is putting upwards of $7.5 billion into EV charging. We're seeing states and utilities across the entire U.S. Put in billions and billions more. Once again, this is to help bring down costs, help signal to customers you should be buying these products. And finally, what I would say is the car manufacturers themselves are investing in EVs. GM is planning to stop making gas cars after 2035. I think that's their current goal. And they're investing $7 billion into EVs to help make that a reality. Ford's investing $2 to $3 billion. I think they just announced that not that long ago. So these are really big things happening from different kind of pillars of the market, if you could call it that I think really helps show that EVs they're a when, not an if.
Well, with this framework in mind, it's a when, not an if, and there's a lot of implementation coming in right now. There's got to be some kind of roadblocks that people are going to experience with this. So do you have an idea of this, or could you give listeners a better idea of what kind of roadblocks that people are still experiencing?
Sure. And, I won't cover everything because we don't have enough time in the day to cover all of the, problems that industry and government are working on to actively solve. But just to kind of highlight a few of them that I think are important is, first things first, drivers want to know that there's enough infrastructure, enough charging stations out there that are available for them to use if they own an EV. Everyone's known this has been a limiting factor for a while, which is why now policymakers are focusing aggressively on trying to get infrastructure deployed. So that's a really big one. Even with the publicly available infrastructure that we have out there, there's been a lot of problems with broken chargers not working for any number of reasons. And that's really, a customer satisfaction problem. If we're trying to convince people that they should be purchasing EVs, but when they charge, it is this frustrating experience. They can't get it to work. It's inconvenient. that's going to dampen their interest. And it really just takes one bad experience for them to tell friends, family, coworkers about what it's like to have an EV and charge. So that's like a really big one that, everyone's working on. FLO has been very focused on that as well. And I would say a third and final that I think is important from an equity perspective is not everyone has access to home charging. Home charging, so whether it's installed in your driveway or in your garage, is generally considered the cheapest, most convenient option for charging. But not everyone has the privilege of that, and especially people living in apartment complexes or maybe they live in single family homes that don't have garages or driveways. And so I think there's a real equity question of how do we serve those households? How do we make sure they have the most convenient, most cost-effective charging experience? And it's not an easy nut to crack either.
No, it's not easy. And, maybe this is where Gemma's experience is going to help us enlighten some of this, some of these things that we're talking about. Because, Gemma, as a user experience designer, what's your take on EVs being within everyone's reach, these roadblocks that we're talking about? What do you think people are looking for in terms of experience?
Yeah, good question. So right now it's true that, first, there's a lot of not a lack of information, I think, for future EV drivers. Like a lot of people are have a lot of range anxiety. They don't know if they buy an EV, they will have enough range to go do everyday life. But after talking with so many EV drivers that we talk since I started working at FLO, we understand that once they get an EV, that anxiety, it's very it lowers a lot. Since they understand that for everyday life, they don't really need a car with a lot of range. So, they understand that they can buy maybe the most affordable EV cars out there. So I think that's the difference between certain users as well. Some users, they look for more the performance and, they are more focused on that. So maybe they want a better car and more expensive. But I think, and those are probably more like what we call the early adopters, that they are more into the tech world and all this stuff. And some others are very into environment and they are really pushing hard, so they don't mind spending that much right now. But we see a switch right now, a little bit of people that are okay, I think the EV is the future, I need to get one. And they are looking at, as Cory said, there's incentives from the government right now and stuff like that. And surprisingly, a lot of EV drivers, one of the motivations once they bought the car is how cheap is to charge. And for them in their mind is I'm actually saving money if we're comparing with the gas. So for the future, I think a lot of people are more and more seeing that actually it can be the future, and it's at some point is going to become more available. And as well, I think Cory pointed out perfectly, some people have home chargers and some people cannot have home chargers, and that's a difference. But both of them, I think, they have really good very well figured out how to charge. For example, if you have a home charger, a lot of people think it's having a gas station per se at home. And, they actually, in their minds, they are saving time because they just plug it at night. The next day when they wake up, it's fully charged and it's, and they are ready to go. And the ones that they don't have, we talked with a few people, for example, in New York lately, and they were very surprised because we installed a few stations in New York recently, and they were super happy that they were close to their house, and they were keeping a normal life, thinking about, okay, I will charge overnight, I will leave my car close to my house, it's 10-minute walk from my house, and even if they don't have a home charger, they feel like they have a home charger. So I think for us, our role here is going to be more thinking about, okay, where are we going to put those chargers to make life of people easier, so the adoption becomes easier as well for them.
Oh, absolutely. And as we're describing this kind of making this a more inclusive approach, I would like both of you to take some time to maybe talk about, when we're designing the EV experience, what does an inclusive mindset look like? Cory?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways to think about it. I mean, just to kind of reinforce the points we've already made, right, is making sure everyone has access to the most convenient, cost-effective solution. That to Gemma's point about the charger being installed at home or adjacent to your home, think about how much easier that is than having to go drive out and find a charger out in the wild, or when you're driving to a gas station, right? I think so. Equity is part of inclusivity. Are we serving all populations the same way, making sure there's equitable access to the technology, just in terms of where do we install these chargers? Where are we placing them? We know low-income communities have less charging stations available than more middle to upper income communities, because those communities are typically early adopters of the technology. When it comes to, so that's like siting and installation, right? But I think the idea of inclusion when it comes to EV charging design, I mean, we have to think about accessibility, like ADA standards. I think you have to also just think about we got to think about like cultural competency when using a new technology. Is this easily understandable to somebody who is trying it out for the first time? Is it intuitive? I'm sure that's a term that Gemma's always thinking through. Is this intuitive for someone who knows nothing about it?
Gemma, what does designing the EV experience with an inclusive mindset look like?
Well, that's a question super important for us, because we're always looking to improve our products. Either if it's digital or even physical, we can influence like the stations themselves. So we want to have as many people as possible to have like the best experience, and with no matter what the background is or the gender or anything. So for us, it's something that we really take care on our team of this. For example, one of the first projects that I was assigned to, I had to recruit people, and it's true that the first research was mainly male, and I think in that research I talked to only 2 women, and yes, by talking to those 2 women, I realized that the perception of EV charging, it was different. The EV world in general, it was different from women than for men. And so, for example, the next research, we really focused on talking to more women. And actually, we did one just specifically to talking to women. And that was very eye-opening because, for example, safety-wise, men, they didn't talk that much. Even they did have some issues, maybe safety issues, but women, it was something that maybe they talked more about. And there were a few other points that women were really talking about more. And so we realized that it was super important to talk to different kind of people and different, incomes and everything. So for us, it was crucial to talk about this because thanks to that, we were able to influence future products. For example, as well, in this case, for example, some women, they were saying, I avoid charging at night because it's scary. It's sometimes the charging stations are in the middle of nowhere or in the back of a Walmart and stuff like that. And I think those are things that, for example, we can improve a lot. Like, we are talking already about implementing lights, thinking really about the location, like trying to avoid certain things. And that is important as a client, like someone that is going to buy a station is like, well, we can really help them. It's like, hey, depends where you put it. You will have more people coming into that. So, like we can influence different things. So that's, I think it's super important to talk to different type of people and have as many feedback as possible.
Yeah, thank you for including some of those examples. I'm curious to know what on the man's side or men's feedback was.
But men usually have more, the feedback is more like, oh, how fast does this station charge? Like, stuff like that. They care more about those things. They don't talk more a lot about the location. They will talk more about the cable management. Like, okay, I want to pull it. That's something that, maybe they talk about, oh, I don't like that the cable touch my car type of thing. But then the women were like, oh, some cables are like hard to push or something like that. So we saw difference in those type of environments, like talking about, okay, what about the station and things like that.
It's so very interesting. I wasn't aware of that. Well, you know what? Thank you to Gemma and Cory for joining us today. And, please look for this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever it is you get your podcasts at. This has been Evolve, brought to you by FLO. Thank you.